All right, welcome back to the Mike and George Show, episode 8. It's our NFL season-long over-under win totals. George and I, we go NFC first hour, AFC second hour, previewing the season outlook for every single team and give our season-long predictions. We don't actually do our season-long predictions, but you can kind of tell who we like and who we don't like based on this episode. Like I said, it'll be a two-parter. I have 3 locks that you get to see coming up here that I absolutely love. So we'll get into that. And without further ado, let's get into it. All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Mike and George Show, and we are joined back again with George here as we are going to go division by division, highlighting the NFL's season, basically every outlook of every team. We're going to go through everyone's over-under win total this year. Should we start with the NFC, George, or should we go? Does it matter AFC, NFC?
Yeah, it doesn't matter to me. We can do NFC.
We can do NFC first. This is your conference, so we'll start with the NFC. A little bit more parity in that conference, but basically today we're going to be going through division by division, so we can start north and work our way down. Every single division in the NFL kind of see who we like this year, as we are literally less than 2 weeks away from, Cowboys versus Eagles, NFC East, your division, as we are going to, start the season off in Lincoln Financial Field as they hoist up the Lombardi banner, Super Bowl 59. So yeah, I guess we can start with the NFC North then, right? I mean, if we, this is maybe the best division in football. Should we start with that one, or should we go?
Yeah, we can go to the North. Yeah, I love talking about the North.
Let's go to the North. So, best division in football last year. Detroit won 15 games. Minnesota won 14 games. Green Bay won 11 games. Chicago was not great last year, but we expect better things from them this year. So what do we think about the NFC North? I mean, obviously there's no way that the Vikings and Lions will combine for 29 wins again next year. What are our early thoughts on this division? I mean, obviously Detroit lost both their coordinators. Minnesota lost their quarterback. Chicago gained a new head coach in Ben Johnson, staying in division, going from the Lions to the Bears. So a lot of familiarity with the division still, but a lot of roster turnover and coaching turnover. So what do we make of this NFC North?
Yeah, it's weird. At the top, you got to look at the Lions first. I think that team was so good all year last year. Jared Goff had a career year. They got to the playoffs and it wasn't quite the same. They had a couple injuries. They weren't all there, kind of up front offensively or defensively.
Right.
But I thought top to bottom, the Lions were great. And I think that this year, it's really, in my opinion, the Lions division. I like the Vikings a lot. I think that J.J. McCarthy he's going to be solid. I'm not sure I would have taken him first round last year, but it was a pretty QB dense draft. And, the Vikings, they do what you're going to do. And, I trust Kevin O'Connell. I think he's one of those elite kind of offensive guru, kind of McVay kind of guys who you just – you gave him Sam Darnold last year and he gave you 14, 15 wins. Crazy. So, I think that the Vikings I think it's the Vikings and the Lions this year, kind of similar to last year.
Right.
I'm super interested to see kind of the outlook of the Bears.
Yes.
As you mentioned, a ton of change, and it kind of feels like there's a little pressure on Caleb almost already.
Yeah.
He was the first overall pick, so there's obviously going to be some kind of pressure that comes with that. But you bring Ben Johnson in, there's no shortage of mouths to feed. There's a million guys on that offense as receivers. I love Cole Kmet. And the offensive line got better. They have brought in stars at both guard positions and the center. So I think that it's going to be interesting. Obviously, I love the Lions first overall, or first in my opinion. But I mean, it's the North and it's a ton of talent. Yeah,
the Lions over/unders at 10.5 right now. This was just I don't know where you stood on this. I took the over on the 10.5 for Detroit. This is just too low for me. I mean, I know now they won't win 15 games. I think we all agree with that. But 10.5, again, I get they lost both their coordinators, but there's no way that this defense is as injury riddled as it was last year. I mean, they get Aiden Hutchinson back. Again, this team won 15 games last year, and Aiden Hutchinson went down in week 5. So that's something he was on pace to, break sack records last year when he went down. They get DJ Reed from the Jets to kind of shore up that secondary, which is a big issue for them last year. I mean, they got shredded through the air by Washington in the playoff game. Now again, they were dealing with injuries all over the defensive side of the ball. They get Aleem McNeil back. So I mean, the Lions, yes, they lose both their coordinators, but they're getting pieces back defensively that they didn't have last year when they were the best team in football by a wide margin. So this is an easy over to me, 10.5. And then quickly go to Minnesota. Their over-unders at 8.5. And this team won 14 games last year. So Vegas is expecting a big regression for the Vikings. I don't know if I agree with that. I like Minnesota. Now, again, they didn't pay Darnold. but I thought they were really wise with their money. I thought they spent it in places where they needed to. They shored up the offensive line, which is a big issue at the end of last year. They bring in Ryan Kelly. They brought in guys that just make sense. They shored up the defense. The defense was great last year. Obviously, Brian Flores might be the best coordinator in football right now on either side of the ball. And they got, like you said, they got Kevin O'Connell on the offensive side of the ball calling plays, and they get Brian Flores on the defensive side of the ball calling plays. And I just feel like 8.5 is too low, even if you're not a McCarthy guy, which I don't think either one. But 8.5 wins. I get the division's tough, but man, they fixed some of their issues. Their O-line last year after Darisaw went down was not great. And Darnold was, had an MVP year for sure, but you saw toward the end of the year that O-line was just disintegrating, and Darnold was not able to kind of replicate the early season magic he had. So I like the over on both Minnesota and Detroit for different reasons. They won't win 15, 14 games again, but these numbers are just too low to me.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you there. I think that the Vikings at 8.5 is a bit crazy to me. I mean, you got a first-year starter at quarterback, J.J. McCarthy, who has never really kind of been the main guy in an offense. At Michigan, we saw a lot of that run game, an incredibly good defense, a couple nice receivers. Right. So he was never really throwing 40 passes a game. But I'm not sure the Vikings are going to need him to. Obviously you're going to have to get the ball to Justin Jefferson, get the ball to Jordan Addison. But I think similar to his Michigan days, his defense is going to be great. He's got great coaches around him. And so I think 8.5 is probably a little reflective of maybe Vegas saying, young quarterback in his first couple of years. Yeah, they just don't know. But I would definitely skew on the higher end at 8.5. Now, moving on to kind of the Bears and the Packers, the Bears at 8.5 as well, which I think is a bit high.
Yeah.
It's nothing against that team. It's a ton of talent. But like we mentioned, that division is so talented, and the Bears play the Commanders. They've got a couple of really tough games. They don't really have an easy schedule. So I mean, if I was going to take an under, I think it would be the Bears. But it's kind of tough. They're all kind of jumbled up at 8.5, 9.5.
Yeah, I see. Again, this might be stupid. I went over with the Bears too. I had the Bears also going over. I love Caleb Williams. I think this is year 2. This is similar to like when the Jags. Remember the Jags fired Urban Meyer after the first year. There was a lot of pressure on Trevor, who went number 1 overall, to kind of show something. Now that division was much weaker than the NFC North, but you get in a guy. I love Ben Johnson. I think this just makes sense. And the Bears, I already liked their weapons, but they completely overhauled and repaired the offensive line, which is terrible last year. Like this Bears offensive line probably went from bottom half of the league. Oh, definitely bottom half of the league. Probably bottom 5 in the league to probably top half of the league. I mean, they brought in like a bunch of dudes who are like known good players. Starting with Joe Thuney. So like they completely overhauled the offense. And there's almost no way, if Caleb's as good as I think he is, and I think as most people thought he was heading out of college, the Bears offense by default will be much improved because Ben Johnson knows offense. They bring in Colston Lovin with the 10th pick in the draft. They get Luther Burden in round 2. Roma Dunze, year 2 receiver, he went top 10 last year. So they have offensive guys. They still have DJ Moore too. So I mean, they got offensive guys, and I think we know the Bears defense should be good. It was good last year despite all the chaos. I don't know. Maybe I'm sipping too much Bears Kool-Aid, but I really like Ben Johnson and I like year 2 Caleb Williams. I'm out on the Packers. So of the unders, I'm on Green Bay's under. Green Bay's over unders at 9.5. They can win 9 games and still go under. I get they won 11-6 last year, but this was a team that went 1-5 in the division. They got swept by Detroit. They got swept by Minnesota. They split with Chicago, and Chicago was terrible. So they were a team that won 11 games, but they didn't really beat anybody doing it. So it was a little bit similar to the Dolphins a couple years ago whenever we were 11-6, but remember we had not beaten anybody. So everyone was like, oh, how good are the Dolphins really? And then we got smoked in the wild card round. And Green Bay got smoked in the wild card round last year too. I don't know. I expect a pullback from them, not because they got worse. I don't even know if Green Bay got worse. I'm just not sure they were ever that good to begin with. Again, they won 11 games last year, but it was a little bit of like, they didn't beat anybody. They got swept by both of their division teams that were any good, and they lost to the Eagles. Like they lost to all the good teams they faced, basically. And the schedule is a little bit tougher this year. So I'm on Green Bay's under. I think they win 8 or 9 games. I think this whole division seems close to me, but I just don't think that Green Bay is like at the level of the roster the other 2 teams in the top are. And I think Chicago, last place schedule might surprise some people. And I just think Green Bay, someone's got to pull back and lose some games. I'm on Green Bay's under.
Yeah, I don't hate that. I think that's totally fair. I wouldn't be shocked if the Packers and the Bears had the same record. They were both kind of 3-4 in that division, and maybe with 8 or 9 wins. I don't know if all of them are going to go over 500, but it wouldn't be the most surprising thing to me.
No.
It's a ton of talent over there. I think the Bears. The thing with me is, and I get it, sipping the Kool-Aid. First year head coach. And you really do have a play kind of a play style and a play shift going from Jared Goff to Caleb Williams. Right. Jared Goff's a guy who loves to be on schedule. He's kind of always been that way in his career. Caleb kind of thrives a little more off schedule, kind of making the plays happen. And so I'm going to be interested to see, is Caleb going to be able to kind of Like I'm sure Ben Johnson's challenging him to take these
Sure.
leaps right now, but is he going to be able to kind of seamlessly adjust to that offense? Training camp is one thing. You can't really take anything you see in training camp. That's kind of just a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested to see. 8.5. It's kind of right in the middle there. It's a great line from Vegas. Credit to Vegas because you don't really know where they're going to land. But yeah, I don't blame you there for taking the under on the Packers. 9.5 is a high bar, and 10 wins is hard to get to.
Yeah, it's a great line by Vegas because they really could be boom or bust. I mean, like you said, I don't know how it's not a perfect marriage between Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, just as far as like the guys that Ben Johnson's worked with in the past. But I just think that it's great for Caleb to get a guy who has worked with other quarterbacks that maybe aren't like Caleb Williams, so that Caleb Williams can maybe start to learn how to play a little bit differently. Mm-hmm. Not that you still want Caleb to be Caleb, but and it was a lot of out of structure last year, and it was a lot of taking sacks unnecessarily. The offense was not great because of it. He didn't throw picks last year, but it was a lot of stalled drives, sacks and drives. So, got to take less of those. And with Ben Johnson, the ball comes out, it's usually his quarterbacks get easy completions, which Caleb didn't have any easy completions last year. So I think the offense will be better, but yeah, the line at 8.5 is a good one because they could win 5 games and they can win 11 games. I think they really could. I mean, if things go really well, they could actually pop and be maybe the second best team in the division if Minnesota's not as good as we think. But yeah, I'm with you there. So we can go to the South. I mean, this is what is the South? I mean, this is the Bucs have won the division 4 years in a row now.
Yeah, it's kind of been the Bucs division for a while now, and I think that kind of continues more the same this year. I do actually really like the Falcons. I think Bijan's poised for a huge year. Michael Penix is another one of those guys that I think he's got a high ceiling. Yeah. And I love the Darnell Mooney Drake London duo. Like offensively, I think the Falcons are great.
Oh, they'll be good offensively. Yeah,
exactly. Defensively, there's a couple nice pieces, but not sure exactly what they're going to put together. But I think it's still the Bucs division in my opinion. The Panthers, I wouldn't be shocked to see them take a step forward. Maybe even we'll get to the over-unders in a second here, but I definitely see the Panthers hitting their over pretty comfortably. But yeah, it's pretty wide open almost as it always is in the NFC South. Right. Well, except for the Saints, I think.
Except for the Saints, yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I love the Bucs this year. I really do. Now their over/under is 9.5. I'm not sure how many wins they're going to get. I mean, I do think they'll hit the over, but I don't think they're going to win like 12 games. Like I think they're going to win 10 games, and I think they're going to win the division. But I wouldn't take it to the bank that the Bucs are going to be like this great regular season team. I just think Tampa will be better as the season goes along. Wirfs is going to miss the first few weeks. They get Jalen McMillan's out until week 9, so they are without a couple of key offensive guys for sure. But I think the Todd Bowles, like the Bucs defense last year was not very good. I think it's going to be much, much better this year. Like I like the moves that they made in the offseason. I think Todd Bowles will have the defense playing better, more opportunistic. They just didn't force any turnovers last year. It was really that simple. Like they just didn't really take the ball away, and they lost a few games that they probably shouldn't have lost. That first Falcons game, they should have never lost that game. The 49ers game, they should have never lost that game. There was games that they could have, like they were at 10-17 last year. They could have easily won 12-13 games. Like they beat everyone they should have beaten, but they lost a few games where they really could have beat. Like they beat Philly, who won the Super Bowl. So like they beat some good teams. They're really good against good teams. They beat Detroit in Detroit, which was one of the only 2 losses that the Lions had last year. So I don't have any. Like if I'm the Bucs, I would not want to face the Bucs in the playoffs. That's what I would say for sure. Like I'm not sure they're going to dominate their division and win like 13 games because the division isn't great. I think we all know that. But I don't think they're going to run away with the division. But I would not want to see them in the playoffs because I think they can beat good teams. I think they can beat Detroit. I think they can beat Philly, the Rams, San Francisco, Washington. Like I think they can play with those teams because they have the talent, they have the roster to do it. And I love the young pieces that Todd Bowles has on defense. But yeah, their over-under. I had the over for them, and then you mentioned Atlanta. Their over-under is at 7.5. Yeah, they won again. I think Atlanta's always going to be in that territory where their offense is great. I think we both acknowledge that their offense is going to be really good. We like the skill guys there. Their offensive line is pretty good. Penix we like. It's defensively, can they get after the quarterback? And they addressed it in the first round. I'm not sure how well it'll be this year because it is 2 rookie pass rushers and James Pierce and Jalen Walker. I don't love their linebacker play. So defensively, Atlanta's got some questions, but I mean they should win 8 or 9 games. So I'm on the over for them too. I mean I got the over on Tampa Bay and Atlanta because I just think Atlanta, first of all these teams have to beat the Saints twice. There's no way you can split the Saints. If you want to hit your over, you have to beat the Saints twice. And I think both these teams should beat the Saints twice. As far as just roster wise, they have better teams than the Saints. So I'm on Atlanta's over and I'm on Tampa Bay's over. I think Tampa Bay wins the division relatively routinely, but I like Atlanta's offense. I think that they should be much improved defensively too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'd like to say I'm over on both of those teams as well, and I also am over on the Panthers. So it's kind of tough because
I am too.
It's kind of hard to imagine exactly. Kind of hard to imagine all 3 of those teams go over. Yeah. But I really like honestly everyone in the South except for the Saints. And so it's interesting. Like the Falcons at 7.5 seems pretty low, 8
Yeah.
wins seems totally feasible, especially with their schedule. And then the Panthers, I was going to get to them a second ago. I really like the Panthers. I mean, obviously, I don't think they're going to contend for any titles or anything yet. But I think Bryce Young has showed steps forward.
Yeah.
Teteroa McMillan's one of those guys that I think has top 5 wide receiver upside. I'm
my
still a little shaken by the Xavier Legette pick last year in the first round. I think that might have been a reach, but he's a guy who's going to be talented. He's going to be out there. And then another receiver who, don't be surprised if you see Jimmy Horn making the roster this year. He's a guy who came from Colorado, 100%. Pretty highly touted guy. He was great at Colorado, and he also kind of slipped in the draft, which I was a little surprised by. Yeah. He's incredibly fast. He's got good hands. He's a hard worker. I know not everyone's all in on those Colorado guys. Some of that little Dion tack, some of that little
right. Yeah.
But I think Jimmy Horn's one of those really good guys. So Panthers offensively, I think, should be very solid, and defensively, they're going to get a lot healthier. So don't be shocked if you see the Panthers, like I said a second ago, making some moves this season.
I like the Panthers offense a lot, which is kind of why I had them hitting the over. I mean, their O-line is good. It's sneakily one of the best O-lines in football. They spent a lot of money on it last offseason, not this previous one, the one before. And then they have receivers. I mean, Jalen Coker is a nice little player out of Holy Cross. Adam Thielen's still playing. So they got like 5 playable receivers.
Yeah, there's a ton of guys in that room.
There's a ton of guys in there that are good, and I like Bryce just like you. I've always been a big Bryce guy. The defense was historically the worst defense in football ever, so it has to be better. How much better? I'm not sure. I mean, they are getting Big Derek Brown back. That's a huge. He was out the whole year last year as he got hurt in week 1. So they are getting him back. They didn't really do a ton to improve it. They had Milton Williams for a second there in free agency. They had him, and then he obviously backed out and went to New England. But that would have been big if they just need to get so much better defensively. And their pass rush is kind of non-existent. So I don't know if they'll be able to get to the quarterback. They bring in Trayvon Merrick in free agency. So they're trying to get a little bit better defensively. But if it's the 32nd unit, if it even improves to like top 25, exactly. That's huge. That's huge for them. I mean, that's not good. But it can't be the worst defense in the history of pro football again next year. Like they can't give up. It can't be that bad again. So I'm on the over with them too. I had them just barely getting to 7 wins. It's 6.5 right now. I think they can win 7 games. Be like a pesky team that finishes strong and kind of we see the year 3 Bryce. And this is my first lock. I mean, I have 3 locks in this thing as far as over unders go. The Saints at 6.5. I think even Vegas knows they're not winning 7 games. I mean, the under here is it's minus 275 on the under. So they're not winning 7 games. I think we all understand that they're not winning 7 games. So the under on the Saints is take it to the bank. Throw it into parlay, whatever you want. But the Saints are obviously not winning 7 games. They are atrocious. We watched some preseason. They played the Jags the other day. Tyler Shuck is just kind of all over the place. Is he even gonna start? I think it might be Rattler. I have no idea.
I don't know. It's kind of tough because I don't want to just hate on the Saints over and over again. But it's just been super confusing. And we've kind of saw this coming a few years ago with the cap space issues they had. They were like $40 million over the cap, and in 2 years' time, they were going to be $60 million over the cap. So they've had to let a lot of guys go. But the Tyler Shuck pick, it really, to me, just seemed like there was a lot of better places you can go, especially in the second round of a draft that was pretty deep, And so it's just kind of one of those things for the Saints this year. I hope I hope Chris Olave can have a healthy season. He's a guy who's never really got the chance to be healthy. He's a guy who I think he was probably the best receiver on that Ohio State team. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Garrett Wilson. I think Chris Olave was right up there with anybody. Yeah. But he's just kind of been hit with concussion bug since he got in the league. But for the Saints this year, it's going to kind of be a character building year. Tough one for the Saints. But
first year Kellen Moore. Yeah, first year Kellen Moore. They got to establish some kind of culture. I'm not going to totally hate on the Saints. I mean, their O-line's pretty good. I know Kelvin Banks. He's had an awesome preseason. He's the highest pass blocking offensive tackle in preseason through 2 games. So they got some building blocks. If they are really bad and it's like a tank for Arch kind of year, the O-line's stable. So if you do bring in another rookie quarterback, they've drafted a bunch of rookie quarterbacks now with Shuck and Rattler. They've drafted quarterbacks over the years. But if they get like a legit franchise guy at top of the draft, I mean, you walk into not a terrible situation. Like I said, the O-line's good. If Olave stays healthy, you got a number 1 guy. Kamara's obviously really good. So it's not a terrible roster, but it's not great. It's not very good.
Yeah. There's a couple teams who I wouldn't be shocked. Just kind of holding out for some quarterbacks. I think the Saints, I think the Browns maybe could be one of them. And then, don't be surprised. The Colts, obviously, they just named Daniel Jones their starter. And then I wouldn't be shocked. I think that one of these kind of under the radar ones, but it's the Rams, coming off kind of what we're seeing in Matt Stafford. I'm sure we'll get to it in a little bit, his questionable health, but there's a few teams this year who probably looking at Arch and Drew Aller, Cade Clubb, Norris Sellers. A lot of these quarterbacks coming out this year who, kind of potential to be those early first round guys. So we'll see.
Yeah. No, I mean, I'm with you. I mean, now let's go to your division now, the NFC East.
Yeah. Yeah.
This division has not had a repeat winner in, I believe, 23 years. It's been over 20 years, I believe. Since
Yeah,
the last,
I think it's been at least 15 years or so. I couldn't tell you the exact
it's
number.
yeah, since I don't know which one it was, but I think it was one of the 2000s, or the last
Yeah.
time we had a repeat NFC East champion. So can the Eagles do it this year? They're defending Super Bowl champions, so obviously they can. I think we all love the moves that Howie Roseman made. By the way, he made another trade yesterday for John Mechie, so it's just like the rich get richer. So I think we both like the Eagles this year, but their over-unders at 11.5 wins, and I took the under. This is way too many wins for me. I look, I don't believe they should have more. The Lions over-unders at 10.5, and I just feel like Philly should not have that many wins as far as like the division's gonna be better. Like Dak's gonna be back. I think the Giants should be better. Washington maybe they don't win 12 games again next year, but the roster is on paper better. So I just think Philly now first place schedule, which they did not have last year. It's tough to win this division back-to-back years. I had them at 11-6, and I just feel like 11.5 is a lot of wins considering they lost some guys in the offensive line. They lost some Kai Becton, Landon Dickerson just went down with an injury. They are still retooling some things defensively. They lose Joshua, they lose Milton Williams. Can Saquon possibly have that good of a season again next year? It's almost impossible to duplicate it because it was almost one of the best rushing seasons ever. He would have broken the record had he played that final week 18 game against the Giants. So I think they'll pull back a couple. I mean, they won 13 games last year. I think they win 2 less games. I don't know. 11.5 is a lot of wins though.
Yeah, I mean, I can get that. I get behind that. You're not going to see me going against the Eagles here.
Totally fair.
It's just a team top to bottom, and even when you're missing a couple guys on the offensive line, it's just everywhere you look, you got stars, and that defense is young, and that defense is getting better, and they've got I can't think of his name, the defensive coordinator, Big Fangio.
Yeah, Big Fangio.
He's awesome. He's awesome back there. So you're not going to see me picking against the Eagles. I'd love to say that I'm taking the Commanders to win the division this year, but I just can't. I think the Eagles do go back to back.
So they do repeat. I have them going repeat. I have them repeating as well, but again, it hasn't happened. It just in this division. It doesn't happen.
So you love to say trends. Your history kind of shows the future. But,
history would suggest that the Philadelphia Eagles would kind of fall off for the end of the year. They nearly won it back to back, and then they kind of remember 2022 season. They faltered. 2023 season they faltered on the stretch, and Dallas kind of snuck up and won it at the end.
Yeah, that was that.
Philly would have won it. Yeah, exactly. That had the MVP type of year. But Philly made the Super Bowl, and then the following year they were like 10-1. And then they fell down the stretch, losing a bunch of games weirdly and lost the division outright.
I think that was kind of a one-off here. That was a year without really a consistent running game. It was kind of just Jalen Hurts. Miles Sanders was fine back there, but behind that offensive line, anyone's going to be fine. So, I mean, assuming everyone stays healthy, I'd like to think the Eagles are just going to they're, in my opinion, they're the class of the NFC.
They are.
I like them really anywhere. They have a great environment. No one likes to play against them on the road. Honestly, like we've talked about this before, but it feels like their weakest position is quarterback, and I still think Jalen Hurts is top 10. So there's not really a miss on this team. So like I said, assuming everyone stays healthy, I think the Eagles are going to continue their dominance. But what I'm more eager to talk about, obviously, I'm sure you're excited to hear this, is the Commanders. Obviously, this is a team with a ton of expectations. Bill Krosky married. He's been the talk of camp so far. He's the man. I'm a little upset because I want to take him in fantasy a little bit later than I could have. But the Commanders are going to be interesting this year. We're assuming Terry's going to play. He's actually back now. He hasn't gotten the contract yet, but I'm sure he's going to suit up. Got a couple guys, bringing Javon Kinlaw, Von Miller, a couple older guys kind of on that defensive line.
Veterans, yeah.
I think we improved the secondary. Will Harris, I like the addition. Trey Amos, I like the addition. So this is a team where I think that similar vibe, where if everyone stays healthy, I might be a little too all in on Jaden Daniels. Sure. But it feels like even at his lowest, even at his average, he's going to be consistent enough to not turn the ball over, to get you enough points to stick around games. And I think the Commanders' schedule this year is super workable. Their over/under is 9.5. That is pretty high. 10 wins is not an easy thing to achieve. Not easy.
No.
But I'm personally under the impression that they are going to go over. I think them and the Eagles both go over. I think the Cowboys are the team in this division that are just going to kind of underachieve.
Okay.
I'm sure we'll get to that in a second, but yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the Commanders because there's a lot going on there right now.
This was tough for me. I went back and forth because I can see this going one of two ways. I can see them going 12-5 again and winning the East, or I can see them kind of underperforming and going 8-9, 9-8. Because there is some year two. There's some pullback. The schedule is tougher. They had a 4th place schedule last year. It is now a 2nd place schedule. It is a workable schedule for sure. But I think we can both agree that was not an NFC Championship roster last year. They overperformed. I think that the roster they had was, they were obviously a year early. I think we expected that. They didn't, NFC Championship game. I don't think anyone thought that was going to happen. The defense was not NFC Championship worthy. The offensive line really wasn't NFC Championship worthy. But yeah, they got there. They won a lot of games last year that you could have lost. The Bears game comes to mind. The Eagles game when Pickett came in. They won that game somehow after with 2 seconds left. So they got a little bit of close game luck last year. Not that's not the reason why they were good. They won 12 games. I mean, they were obviously really good. I had them going over and winning 10 games, but man, I was going back and forth between 9-8, 10-7. I just think that the roster is overall better than it was last year. The move that no one really was talking about that I think is maybe the biggest move in the entire division was getting Laramie Tunsil. They get Laramie Tunsil, that completely improved. Now you get Laramie Tunsil, you draft Josh Connerly, you have the tackles figured out now in Washington. So you don't have to really worry about Jaden Daniels, as far as pass protection go. Last year was a lot of RPO stuff, a lot of quick game for Washington. I think they can kind of do a little bit more stuff and be a little more creative as far as straight drop back passing game goes, because you don't have to really worry about your quarterback getting hurt. You did address the offensive line to kind of prepare for the Eagles pass rush and the likes of the Giants pass rush, even Micah Parsons in Dallas if he's still there. So Washington knows what division they're in, and their offseason was good. I still like Debo. I think Debo has some juice too. So I just like the roster too much to go under. But we see it happen a lot in the NFL where, a team has this magical run. It felt like last year the Commanders were a team of destiny, winning all those close games at the end with the Bears, Hail Mary, the Jaden Daniels 5-touchdown game late against Philly, the second game in Philly, in Washington, I should say. So they won a lot of those games where it was just kind of craziness. They probably won't win those games this year, but I just think the roster's too good to go under here. So I'm going to go over 10 wins, but it's tough because I can really see this going one of two. I can see them winning the East, really. But then I can also see them pulling back, and then, Dak is back. Dak usually has their number. The Giants are better. It's tough, but I am going to go over. Barely over.
Yeah. I mean, I understand all your points, and, you're going to hear a little bias come out of me here. But people talk about the Bears game and getting lucky, but they don't talk about the Steelers game. And they don't talk about the 28-27. They don't talk about the Cowboys game where we missed an extra point. That would have been overtime. So, it goes both ways. Football's tough because you can be very similar top to bottom lineup on paper, and the ball bounces a certain way, you're going to win or you're going to lose. So all you can do is stock up. And like you said, the Commanders, they only got better this offseason. Laramie Tunsil, love that. Josh Conley, love that. Sam Cosby's coming back. Tyler Biadasz, he's been fantastic for us. He's one of those guys that can run. And Alec Reddy was great. He was a great signing from KC last year. Yeah. So, this offensive line, you'd like to think it's figured out. Yeah. And obviously, I think Debo, everyone's going to give him this trash. He looked great last night on that jet sweep.
I think he's good in this offense. I really do.
Slow. Yeah, and then one of the biggest things that people are talking about, but it almost feels like the biggest benefit we got was Cliff Kingsbury coming back. Cliff Kingsbury's a guy who's worked with Kyler Murray, he's worked with Caleb Williams, he's worked with everyone you could imagine. It feels like, and he's been successful with those guys. Yeah. And he turned down the Saints coaching offer. I think he turned down maybe another coaching offer. Yeah, at least the interview. Because he said he wanted to come back. He wanted to stay with Jaden Daniels. He wanted to continue building on what he had last year. And so it's tough to say that they're going to take a step back or it's tough to say they're not going to take a step back. Year two, it is a tougher schedule, and there's a lot of those one score games could go the other way. But, the win total is 9.5, so I'm going to take the over, and we can move on from the Commanders.
Yeah, I believe that he also turned down the Raiders. I think the Raiders wanted to bring him in for a visit. He turned them down. Let's go to Dallas now. Dallas's over-under is at 7.5. This is so tough. A week ago, I would have said over. I just think that having Dak back, say what you want about Dallas. I don't really love the roster, if I'm being honest. Overshown's already going to be out for a majority of next year, which is a huge hit. But I just feel like with Dak back, they're always going to be afloat. They're always competitive with Dak Prescott. He owns the Giants. He doesn't lose to the Giants. He's been good against, Washington. So these are games that Dallas didn't really win last year. No, they did beat Washington at Washington. But usually with Dak, they're in the mix at least. So 8 wins, they could get to 8 wins. I think they could get to 8 wins. I mean, if you ask me right now, I'd probably say that they might go 7-10. But the NFC, so there's a lot of parity in the NFC right now. If you told me Dallas won 8 games, I really wouldn't be surprised, especially if Dak's healthy the whole year. Because usually if Dak's healthy the whole year, they're in the mix. They're at least winning 8 games. They're in the playoff race late in the year. I just don't love the offensive line, if I'm being honest. I don't love the running game still. I really don't love much of the roster. I just like Dak, CD, and Micah. That's really it.
Yeah. I mean, offensively, I think they've got a ton of great opportunities or great pieces. I think Pickens and CD, if they're healthy, they're going to be super productive. And Dak's going to give them the ball, like you said. Dak is a floor raiser.
Yeah.
With Dak, you feel like you got at least 6 wins. So it wouldn't be crazy to think you have 8 wins.
They won't
Right?
bottom out. No, they won't. Not with Dak. They
Exactly.
won't bottom out.
I think barring an injury, I think there's no way they bottom out. But I think the story with the Cowboys, as it always is what's Jerry Jones doing? We talked about it a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it's just been confusing all offseason. Brian Schottenheimer, it kind of feels like a no upside hire.
Yeah.
You had Mike McCarthy in there, and I saw Colin Cowherd talking about this on his show a couple days ago. Mike McCarthy it was like 12-5, 12-5,
just
10-7.
Yeah.
And then Dak got hurt. Dak gets hurt, and you kind of bottom out a little bit. And all of a sudden, you're like kind of losing your job when it's not really your fault. And so when that happened, I was like, okay, who are they bringing in? And when they brought in Brian Schottenheimer, it's just really confusing. It kind of feels like he's one of the Jerry guys.
Yeah.
Kind of lets Jerry have his hand on the pulse. He's going to let him do what he wants. And then you got the defense, who was pretty underwhelming last year, and they're probably their two best players are not happy. Mike is not happy. Trayvon Diggs is not happy with their contract. They're both threatening to not play, and we're 2 weeks away from the start of the season. So I'm sure they're going to figure it out. I'm sure Micah and Trayvon are going to dress. But it's just there's just so many question marks. And to me, I'd rather be in a place like the Giants, where you've got a comfy, strong defense, you've got a coach who knows his offense, and you've got kind of in wounded animal mode. You kind of need this one. And Russ is similar to Dak. Russ is a floor raiser. Russ is going to win you games. He's going to win you about 5-6 games. And the Giants, there's a couple question marks, but I like Scattaboo, Tyrone Tracy. I think they're very complimentary. I think that Jackson Dart has a ton of space to grow. I think he's played a lot of football. He's played, I think, 5 years it was at Ole Miss. So, I'd rather be the Giants. It's tough because you feel like the Cowboys are kind of the bigger name, probably have some bigger stars, no pun intended. But I don't know. The Cowboys kind of scare me this year.
They scare me for sure. But yeah, you mentioned McCarthy. They won 12 games 3 years in a row. Like, they were in the playoffs 3 straight years. They had that wild card loss embarrassingly to the Niners, where Dak didn't, know the clock. Then the next year they lose at San Fran in the divisional round. And then the year after that, they get smoked at home in the wild card round by the 7 seed Packers. But they did make it 3 years in a row. They won 12 games 3 years in a row. Last year was really the only year we saw Mike McCarthy not hit that threshold, and it was just because his quarterback got hurt. It was pretty simple. Now, I don't think they win 12 games even if Dak's healthy, because that team had holes last year that just no one really addressed. But nonetheless, that was like, if they can get back to what they were, albeit with Brian Schottenheimer, which I don't think either of us think is a high upside coach, they can certainly get to 8 wins, and I wouldn't put it past them to get to 8 wins. But you mentioned the Giants. I don't know if I'd rather be the Giants, but I do think they have building blocks to go off of, better than the Cowboys. Like, their D line is nasty. The Giants D line is really good.
Very good.
They're over under 5.5. And if you just told me this roster, I would, I look at the roster, I'm like, that's a 6-win roster at least.
Easily, yeah.
The problem is the Giants' schedule is brutal. I mean, I pulled it up earlier. They won't be favored in like any game. They play the Saints like week 5, but like the first 4 games they play, at Washington, at Dallas, the Chiefs come to town, the Chargers come to town. Then they got to face the Lions, the Eagles, the Broncos, the Eagles. They face the NFC North. They face the entire NFC North and the entire AFC West. There's no breaks in the schedule, really. Yeah. So I think we all acknowledge the NFC North is the best division. So they won't be favored over the Giants. I mean, they won't be favored over the Vikings, the Packers, the Lions, probably not even the Bears. They won't be favored over much of the AFC West either. Like, Denver's better than them. The Chargers are just better than them. Chiefs are better than them. This division is tough. Washington's better than them. Philly's better than them. So it's just like, where are the wins coming from? Like, I tried to get to 6 wins with the Giants. I just couldn't find the 6 wins. I really just couldn't find them. So I have to go under, even though I like the Giants roster. I do agree that, Russ is a floor raiser, but, Russ at this age, will take a lot of sacks. The Giants O-line does still have question marks, for sure. So, and I think in this division with the Eagles pass rush, if Mike is healthy, there's just 3 teams I just feel like are better than them. So someone's gonna have to get these losses, and I can't find 6 wins for the Giants with that schedule. I just can't do it. So I'm gonna go under on the Giants.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. I can't be upset about that. That schedule is brutal. It's tough because in terms of the outlook, I still would rather be the Giants, but this season,
I agree. Yeah.
Pretty tough schedule. But yeah, I think that's a fair take. I think that's totally legit. But yeah, it's just kind of those we'll see. Russ and Dak, like, I'm not really excited about either of those. So it wouldn't be shocked if it's kind of just them 2, 3, and 4. But it really is kind of anyone's third place is the way I'm looking.
Yeah. So just for reference, they got at Washington, at Dallas, Chiefs, Chargers. Then they get the Saints. Then they get Eagles, Broncos, 49ers, Bears, Packers, Vikings, Lions, Patriots, Washington after their Week 14 bye. At that point, their Week 14 bye, they may already be out of it. Then you might go to Jackson Dart. and face Washington at home off the bye. You get them 2 weeks to prepare. But
Yeah.
at that point, it's over. I mean, these teams are they're playing monsters out the gate. So I mean, they might be like 3-10 by the time they get to Dart. And at that point, do they even win their last 3 games, or are they just tanking at that point? Like, they might just be soft tanking at the end of the year. So I just can't get them to 6 wins. It's just too tough with that schedule. They play Vegas late in the year, they play Dallas late in the year. But at that point, their season may already be over. So what's the incentive in winning?
Yeah, no, I hear you on that.
But yeah, so we can go to the NFC West now, which is maybe the most competitive division. The North is probably the best division, but the West is like all these teams last year were separated by 2 games. The Rams won the West at 10-7 last year, but Seattle was 10-7. The Niners were, I believe, 7-10. So I believe they were 3 games back, but Arizona was like 7 or 8 wins. So the division last year was like heading into December, every single team was within a game, I believe. So this division, and right now the over-unders for every team, San Fran's at 10.5, the Rams are at 9.5, Seattle and Arizona are both at 8.5. So Vegas is telling you this division is incredibly close. So, what do you think about who's winning this division? First of all, this is a total toss-up to me.
Yeah, it's kind of a crapshoot.
It is a crapshoot. Yeah,
it almost feels like the Big 12.
It is the Big 12. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah,
it's like an accordion. They're all great, or they're all kind of spread out, and it could go anywhere. It's interesting because I think my favorite team in this division is the Seahawks.
Okay.
I'm still not sure I'm sold on Sam Darnold. He was great for a long time last year. He's got a different coach. Mike McDonald's a little bit different. But I think that, that roster is really solid, and it's more so not even that I'm super high on the Seahawks, but I think that they've drafted well. They've got a bunch of young guys on that defense that I really like. I think their receiver room is underrated. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba has the potential to be a legit number 1.
Yeah.
And then it's like the Rams, Stafford's a little confusing. We're not sure what we're getting out of Stafford because
what's the back injury like?
Without Stafford, it kind of seems like he's all or nothing there. The Niners, I'm pretty interested in the Niners. I think McCaffrey and Kittle are going to be great. But the wide receiver room is leaves a little bit to be desired. I like Pearsall, but I'm not sure he's my number 1 guy. I like Jawan Jennings, but I'm not sure he's my number 1 guy. And the Cardinals kind of similar. I like Kyler Murray. I think he's still got a lot in the tank. But I don't know a ton about the Cardinals. So, like I said, it kind of feels like an accordion. It kind of feels like they move together.
Sure.
And I think if everyone's healthy quarterback-wise, I like the Rams. I think I still got to give the credit to Matt Stafford. But with all the question marks and with the potential that Sam Darnold might have, I like the Seahawks too. So it's hard to pick one.
Yeah, this is so tough. I have the Rams going over 9.5, but it's with an asterisk. I mean, the asterisk is Matt Stafford. I mean, it really is. Because I like the Rams when he's healthy, obviously. I love their defense. They just draft a bunch of young studs. They don't even do it with first-round picks either. But they just draft dudes that are just like awesome, immediate, productive guys. I think Puka Nacua being back healthy, they really didn't have – he was injured for a little bit last year, and they still won 10 games, won the division. They bring in Devontae Adams, who I believe is an immediate upgrade over Cooper Kupp. And because of that, I don't love Seattle this year. I just think Seattle had a philosophy change that I don't agree with. They bring in Cooper Kupp. I just don't love the move. I'm sorry. I like Cooper Kupp. It just Seattle has like a room full of receivers under 5'11", and it just feels like they go away from DK. They bring in a bunch of slot guys. They're taking away like the way they paid Kupp the amount of money to where it's like, okay, he's gonna catch a lot of balls for them. Like he's gonna be a focal point in the offense, which means JSN's gonna be a primary outside receiver. And they're just changing a bunch of things. Like, because with last year it was DK, it was Lockett, and it was JSN controlling the underneath stuff. So it's just like they're changing things. Now, I do like that they address the offensive line. They get Gray Zabel round 1. I like Gray Zabel a lot. They got to get back to running the football because that's what they're built on doing. Their defense is really good, obviously, with Mike McDonald. The problem I have, and I like Darnold, but I just feel like this is there's a chance that this is a KOC, Kevin O'Connell product. And, the second he leaves Kevin O'Connell, we see some regression. Not to compare him to Kirk Cousins, because Kirk Cousins had the Achilles injury. But usually when guys go away from Kevin O'Connell, there's slight regression a little bit. And, I don't love the fact that Darnold's going from an offensive coach to a defensive coach, even though I do love Mike McDonald. I don't know if that Seattle roster has as much upside. Certainly not as Minnesota. And I don't think that like Darnold had an MVP caliber year last year. Like he's due for some regression. He's a regression candidate. And I don't know how much Cooper Kupp has left in the tank. So just based off of that, and I do like that Seattle, like I said, they're going to be a more running football team, I believe. With the loss of Lockett, with the loss of Metcalf, and the additions that they made on the offensive line, maybe they stress more Kenneth Walker, Zach Charbonnet, and they use Darnold, relieve some stress from Darnold to throw the ball over the yard. But I'm on the Rams right now as far as the NFC West champions again, but that's completely up to if Stafford is healthy or not, because the back injuries are tough. They're tricky, especially with quarterbacks. San Fran's an interesting one. Their over-under's 10.5 wins. I love the 49ers, and I can admit this is too many wins. This is just too many wins for me. Like, I went under here. I had them winning 10 games, but I did not think that their over-under be 10.5 games. I mean, they won 6 or 7 games last year. Now, it was a season from hell for sure. They were just deteriorated with injuries last year. It was brutal. And it feels like this happened. It's happened twice now after Super Bowls. 2019, they made the Super Bowl, lose to the Chiefs. 2020, they get derailed with injuries, starting with Nick Bosa in week 2, who got towards ACL against the Jets in MetLife. And that COVID year was just disastrous for San Francisco, where they won like 5 games after making the Super Bowl. Then they go to the NFC Championship game 3 years in a row. And then last year, off the Super Bowl loss, they have a terrible season, completely derailed by injuries, starting with Christian McCaffrey with the Achilles right off the bat last year. So they lost everybody. I mean, they lose Ayuk, who tore everything in his knee. They lost everyone last year. It felt like Kittle missed some time. Purdy missed a couple games. So the Niners will be healthy this year. Now, they did lose a lot defensively as far as in free agency goes. But I love that they get Robert Saleh back as far as the defensive coordinator. Steve Wilkes was really bad last year, defensive coordinator. They get Saleh back, who knows some of these guys are still there. The namestay guys are still there, and Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. Those guys were there when Robert Saleh was leading the number 1 defense a few years ago before he got the Jets job. So I just believe that the Niners will be much better. But at 10.5, I can't take the over. I do believe they're a playoff team. I think there's 2 playoff teams in this division. I believe it's San Francisco and LA. But usually one of these teams always gets injured. You know, when San Francisco's beat up, the Rams win the division, and then it's vice versa. If the 49ers win the division, usually the Rams are dealing with injuries, whether it's Stafford or whoever else. So can both these teams be healthy at the same time? If they are, I think they're the 2 best teams. But I can't take the over with San Francisco right now.
Yeah, San Francisco's tough. You know, like you mentioned, Saleh, I loved him coming back as the defensive coordinator.
Huge.
He kind of got scapegoated a little bit. You know, you take the Jets job, but you're kind of bound to get scapegoated at some point.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, so the defense should definitely take a huge step forward. Ayuk's not supposed to be back till probably halfway through the season, which is kind of why I'm a little hesitant. It just kind of feels like every team in this division has question marks. And I guess the biggest one is the Rams because it's their quarterback. You know, it's kind of who's quarterback in the offense. But, you know, everyone's got question marks. So it's kind of hard to pick a winner, you know. But, yeah, like we haven't really talked about the Cardinals. And it's just kind of like, you know, the Cardinals I'd love to hear your take on the Cardinals.
So here's my thing on the Cardinals. Because they were in it last year. They actually had the division lead heading into December. They faltered down the stretch. My worry with the Cardinals and why I had them going under 8.5, I had them at 8 wins, is because I can't trust Kyler Murray. It's too inconsistent with Kyler Murray. There's some months where he just has a bad month of football, and unfortunately, a bad month of football will lose you a division. I mean, he'll have games where he has like 4 games in a row where he's just not good. The game at Carolina last year, the game at Seattle last year, where he was just bad, and those were games late December. They needed to win those games. You know, they were right there. The game at the Rams, they lose 17-9. He's gonna be better than some of these games. My question with the Cardinals, because I think Jonathan Gannon is doing a pretty good job with the defense. Like, their defense doesn't have a bunch of household names, but they're actually playing better. They get Josh Sweat, who was with the Eagles with Jonathan Gannon, ironically enough. So he gets him back from Philly. That was their big offseason pickup defensively, which was Josh Sweat at pass rusher. They bring in Calais Campbell, who can still play at 39 years old. So that the Cardinals have some pieces defensively. Like, they'll be better. And I don't put it past Jonathan Gannon to get the defense, you know, playing better football. My worry would be, you know, Kyler Murray's consistency at quarterback right now. And as far as their run game goes, it was a lot of relying on James Conner last year. It just feels like James Conner's due for an IR stint. They ran him so much last year. I like year 2 Marvin Harrison. Outside of that, I don't love much of their receiver room. So we'll see on Arizona. They don't have a ton of, like, they don't have a high ceiling to me. I believe the defense will be better, but I can't trust Kyler Murray in a division with Brock Purdy and Matthew Stafford, who I just like more. I just can't do it.
Yeah, I think that it's interesting because I agree with you that inconsistency from Kyler Murray has kind of just been kind of his.
It's too hot or cold.
It's hot or cold, you know. And when he's running the ball and he's able to when he's 100%, he's great, but he's not 100%. And I think last year, you know, I love Trey McBride last year. I think he's poised for another great year. You know, Marvin Harrison, if he can kind of step into that role, that really what we saw Malik Neighbors do. You know, it almost felt like it was supposed to be Marvin Harrison. You know, he had so much hype coming out of the draft. He's like the best prospect ever, and he was super quiet. And I don't think he like had a touchdown or didn't have a completion or something for a couple of weeks. It was a little weird over there. You know, very quiet in Arizona. And so, you know, they've got Budda Baker, they got Calais Campbell.
So they got pieces defensively.
So they'll be a fun watch, but Yeah, I think that in this division, in terms of like the Rams have a ton of guys, the Seahawks a ton of guys, Niners a ton of guys, especially offense and on defense. Kind of feels like the Cardinals are a little bit like the weak link out. And
Sure.
when their quarterback is Kyler Murray, who's significantly, not significantly, I wouldn't say, but in my opinion, is the worst of the four in that division.
Right.
I agree with you on the under 8.5.
Yeah, the whole division. I had the Rams and Niners at 10-7. I had Seattle and Arizona at 8-9. But I think all four of them will be separated by like not like I think they're all close. Like you said, they all have question marks. I can see any of the four. If you told me any of the four won the division, I wouldn't be shocked, certainly. But if I had to rate them 1 through 4, I'd put Arizona at 4 strictly because I can't really trust the most important guys on their team. I can't trust. I think Seattle, I think the roster's a little bit better than Arizona's, and I like Mike McDonald and Darnold a little bit less inconsistent. And I just know, but like Seattle's, they've won 10 games, they won 9 games, they won 8 games. Arizona, I can't really trust in those big spots. And I think the Rams and Niners, when both of them are healthy, are inarguably have the best coaching staffs in football, or at least in this division, with McVay and Shanahan. And those staffs are just incredible every year, San Francisco's and LA's. Again, usually they're both not healthy. They're usually both not healthy at the same time. The only time they was when they met in the NFC Championship game when the Rams beat them and ended up winning the Super Bowl the following week against Cincinnati.
Yeah.
So if both these teams are healthy at the same time, I think it's it's a 2-horse race, but I have all four of them separated by 2 games. And Vegas is telling you the same thing. Vegas is saying that all 4 of these teams can win 9 games because Seattle and Arizona are at 8.5, and that's like the weak links in the division. These are not bad teams. So no, I'm totally with you there. So I think we mostly agree on the NFC. The AFC is a little bit more interesting, and we'll get to the AFC here. After this quick break, we'll go to the AFC, which is maybe a more cut and dry conference. The NFC is so much parity. I think we agree that a lot of parity in NFC. There's not like no one's really separated from the pack outside of like Philadelphia, obviously. But even them, like
Lions, Philadelphia.
Yeah, Detroit's like right there. Like I thought Detroit and Philly were set up for a collision course last year. We never got the matchup because Detroit had so many injuries defensively. But those two teams, I mean, even Vegas has it here. Those two teams have the most win. The win total goes Eagles 1, Lions 2. So Vegas is telling you those are the 2 best rosters in the conference. And I don't disagree, obviously. So yeah, but the NFC, there's teams that we said it. There's teams that can come out of nowhere. The NFC North is totally unpredictable. The NFC West is totally unpredictable. I mean, even the South, we think the Bucs will win it, but we like Atlanta, we like Carolina. Like there's teams that like could easily win 7-8 games. Yeah, like how? Like I think. Yeah, I mean,
when you make predictions, you kind of assume everyone's healthy, and that's just not the reality.
You're right. Yeah, when we make these predictions, we're assuming everyone's healthy, which of course is unrealistic with every NFL team. But you can't predict injuries. So yeah, with that, we will close the book on the NFC part of this episode, and then we'll hit the AFC after this break.